And next we've got Kasali Pride Mage, which I always thought was such a cool card. I've admired this card for a long time. It doesn't see that much modern play anymore, but it's still pretty cool. There is also, in addition to the original, there is a big version, a big cat version in FNM promo. And the big one's pretty cool. The big one is pretty cool, but I think the Chris Ron original is probably my preference overall, and certainly 1000% my preference for the time-shifting treatment. I think the old gold border, just to address this at the beginning, is probably going to divide opinion perhaps more than any other color, even including the artifact major shift from silverish gray to brown, right? But the old border, not for everybody in gold, but for me, I do really like it, just like I like all the other gold borders. And as back to the Kasali Pride Mage in particular, this cat looks like it could be a time traveler in that it could belong to almost any old border set. So definitely the correct art by far, and I'm actually favorably disposed toward this printing in general. I think we start off the gold selection with a solid A. I'm definitely not amenable to going much lower than that. I could see A minus, but we're feeling generous. Let's give an A. Arcadis the Strategist is next, and I have mixed feelings about this, because on the one hand, it's really cool to time shift a card that itself calls back to the original, like, Elder Dragon cycle in Legends, I believe that is. And so the idea is great, and seeing the name and the type line in the old font, in the context of the old border, is lovely. That said, the card itself, not the most exciting to me. Kind of fire designy in a way that's a lot less egregious than others, but still, not my favorite. The art, not my favorite either. I could have definitely seen new art being commissioned for this old border process for sure. In fact, I think I might like it a little bit less once it is in better resolution, right? Because I almost want an Elder Dragon to be, a little more off the beaten path in terms of what the art depicts. This art is not the worst I've ever seen, but it is also very modern feeling and very safe, in a way that I don't think necessarily suits the task of time-shifting an Elder Dragon. So as I say, I have mixed feelings about this. Ultimately, I'm a little bit disappointed, compared to what I imagine could have been. So I'm going to give this one a B minus, because there still is a fair amount to like, but probably not too much more than that. Ever-Flowing Chalice from Steve Argyle is next. At least the original printing and the one that got time-shifted is from Steve Argyle. There is actually another one, and this is a pretty cool card, I'm not gonna lie. I do like this FNM promo Ever-Flowing Chalice as well. That said, my preference does definitely lean toward the Steve Argyle art in a vacuum, and there can be no question that this is by far the correct version to time shift. It is definitely suiting the brown border down to the ground, definitely a very, very nice one. So the, we might hesitate before giving it a straight A for a couple reasons. Number one, I do think, again, in a vacuum, the FNM promo is a respectable alternative, despite not being the one that they time-shifted. And number two, this is a Dice Factory card, and wherever else it might see play, present, past, or future, you do have to say, okay, like, how many brown bordered artifacts can I incorporate? Is it going to be only Chalice? If so, maybe you should stick with the newer border just for continuity. You got to think about the aesthetics of the deck as a whole, not just each individual card. So those two considerations have got me keeping this around an A-, but if there was no alternative art, and or if it went straight into a deck with a bunch of other brown-bordered artifact companions, this could be an A or even an A+. Very nice-looking card in the old frame. The next one, my friends, gets a D, I'm afraid. Feather the Redeemed. Everything about this rubs me the wrong way, and that's no offense to Wayne Reynolds, who has done some art that I really like. But the art here, absolutely not doing anything for me. Feels too blocky, too digitized, too cartoonish. Not immersive enough as far as a fantasy setting goes. I don't like the way the card plays. I don't like the name of the card. I remember remarking when I first saw this that this looks like a custom card from like the custom Magic subreddit. Everything about it, the name, the art, the text, it all feels like a custom card, and a relatively low effort one at that. I don't mean to be too harsh, but I don't understand the card overall, and I don't agree with time shifting it. And that's no hate on the angel type. This is another reason I don't like it. It's a missed opportunity to time shift any number of incredibly beautiful angels. We saw how good Restoration Angel, for example, looked time shifted. Give us a cooler angel than Feather. I mean, I'm sure Feather is a commander card or sees play in newer formats or whatever, but like, come on. No fan of this one. This one is a D. It's a stinker. But these time-shifted cards don't let us down for very long. It's impossible to miss twice in a row. So next up, we have one of the very coolest ones. We have Bloodbraid Elf. That's right, Jund players, rejoice. We have Bloodbraid Elf. In and of itself, that is just spectacular. Fantastic decision. Putting old bordered cards into Jund, oh, you do love to see it, my friends. We didn't get everything we wanted, not even really close, but we got this, and this is huge. Now, the Bloodbraid Elf art discussion far predates this concern of what fits best in the old border. This is something people talk about all the time, almost as much as they talk about Tarmogoyf art. So we have the Dominic Domingo printing that was actually chosen to be time-shifted, and I know for a lot of people this is their favorite. This Bloodbraid Elf feels very Gruul, feels very savage, really owning the type line of Elf Berserker. And, you know, certainly a lot to be said for that. That said, personally, in a vacuum, it is not my favorite. My favorite is this one. It is the FNM promo that was brought to us by the legendary Steve Argyle, and in this case, we have a different take on the Elf Berserker. Feels more elven in kind of a Tolkien-style sense or a high fantasy sense, but certainly owning that Berserker half as well, with the war paint, with the very red background. And here's an example of a background that definitely suits a foreground that is not so red, and that's what we have here. I love, love, love this Argyle piece, and it, on the other hand, it doesn't quite feel as old as Dominic's piece, and therefore I really respect the decision to time-shift Dominic's piece. That said, I am still really attached to this art, looking at them side by side. Even though I'm the number one old border respecter, I don't necessarily feel like I have to have the old border, so I'm torn. That said, are you going to see me play this old border Bloodbraid on the channel? Yeah, absolutely. There's also this one from Raymond Swanland, which I feel is a little bit underrated, although I do know at least some people have it as their favorite one. It's cool. There is some similarity between the first two in that they're both kind of posing. They're both kind of maybe readying some troops before battle or poised for battle themselves, whereas this third Bloodbraid Elf, she is in the act. She is hasty and she is attacking you, and it's well executed, and it's very, very interesting. Again, I think this one's underrated. That said, I don't think this one should be time-shifted. It feels the newest. It probably feels the least iconic, even though I have nothing really bad to say about it. So, for me, personally, would I have liked to see the Steve Argyle one? Yeah, probably. At the same time, I do acknowledge that there are perhaps more overall incentives to time shift Dominic Domingo's version. So overall, I'm excited enough that I'll give it an A. An A minus. If it was a card that I didn't play, I would probably give it more like a B plus. Not because I'm against anything about it, but just because I think the alternatives are still so strong. Contagion Clasp is next up, my friends, and you know what? It's funny because I feel exactly the same about this card as I do about Everflowing Chalice. It's the same thing. We have an original printing, and we have that most people probably favor, and we also have a very respectable promo printing that is different and still cool and still competitive with the other one, and it gives you a different vibe if you need that different vibe for your surrounding cards of the deck. Also, at the same time, I think we made the correct decision to time shift the original. So, as I say, although, the more I'm looking at it as I'm talking, I think this F&M promo would probably look just about as good. So, I was going to say it's just the same exact thing as Ever-Flowing Chalice. Maybe that's not true. Maybe there is a little bit closer competition between this clasp and the promo version. I don't know, now that I'm looking at them, which one I completely favor. So I'm going to lower the grade a little bit because to me there's more of a question mark over this, but a fine card, I guess, to time shift, and definitely looks pretty good no matter which one they used in the old frame. B+. We've got Temur Ascendancy next, and you know how I've been saying throughout the series that Tarkir block lends itself well to the new frame? That is true. Cool looking card. To me, this is a rare example of a Tarkir block card that is massively improved by the old frame, and I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's just as simple as the snowy landscape. I think I always feel very nostalgic for snowy depictions in old borders of outdoor settings. Ice Age is an obvious example, but even other sets that are not purely based in a solely wintry climb, I also like a lot. So I don't exactly know why, but I want to give this one almost an A+. Maybe I need to see it in paper or in a less blurry rendition to fully commit to that. I'm hovering between A+ and A, and we shouldn't give out A+ unless we're sure. So let me revise that down to an A, but this one looks great, if you ask me, in the old frame. Next is Field of Ruin, another one very exciting for yours truly. Of course, we do play it in good old rock, and it already feels more powerful, doesn't it, in that old frame? Oh boy, it just feels like it is a more powerful effect. So between those two things, in between my standing of the old borders in general, I'm obviously very, very favorably disposed to this, but I don't know that this art from Ixalan suits the old frame all that well. I think if we had maybe a little bit less detail almost in the stuff that's going on in the aftermath of the battle and all the weapons that are left behind and stuff, and or a little bit more carnage, you know what I mean? If there was some dead bodies lying around in various states of deathly repose, we might actually feel a little bit more with the old border energy here. That and or the light coming down from the sky, which I do like. I like the piece in general from Dimitar. Does it altogether suit the old border? I'm not so sure. We do also have another interesting Field of Ruin with a very different color palette, a very different feel overall, and I'm also tempted to say at first glance that this one does not especially suit the old border either from Jung Park, but I could be wrong about that. I would really like to see this one. This could be one of those where the contrast really makes it pop. So with that in mind, I love it. I think just seeing the old bordered Fields of Ruin in my list of lands, like on the MTGO deck central screen, is going to be really cool. Beyond that, I think it does fall a little bit short for the aforementioned reasons. At the same time, it's probably not realistic to expect them to commission a third piece of art for this, although I think that would be ideal. So where do I fall with this? Yeah, B+, maybe rising to A-. We'll see how it looks when I'm actually playing with it alongside the other BG the Rock lands. Lavinia is next, and Lavinia gets an A. This is her only art. She looks very, very nice in it in general, but also very suited to the old border in a way that a lot of Guilds of Ravnica cards probably are not. You have the kind of brushwork in the background. This could belong to many older eras of Magic. Only something about her face is the only thing that might be a little bit newer feeling. Otherwise, we are looking at a card that could belong to some of the very oldest sets of Magic, and a card that also seems to thrive the more powerful and therefore the older a format gets in general. So yeah, an easy A for me. Well done here. I'm sorry I misspoke and I completely forgot about the extended art, alternative art, Lavinia, that also exists, and this one feels a lot more modern. So this is a cool one too. It's definitely a cool one to have access to. I don't think it's going to shy me away from an A, though. It's definitely not the one we should be time shifting, so I'm glad they time shifted the original. And for me, while I would rate this one maybe close-ish to the first original copy. I think, with the old border, there's just no contest. So I wanted to include that for completion, but yeah, still an A. Next is Ancient Den, and I don't know how to rate this one. I love the old border lands, and I think overall it is improved to a pretty significant degree by the old border. At the same time, number one, I don't know why they did only one of the cycle here of the artifact lands, and number two, I in general don't know how to feel about the artifact lands, because I don't have a strong opinion on whether or not they should come off the banned list, whereas most people do. So I'm agnostic on the cards themselves as far as they fit into Modern or would destroy Modern, and I'm also going to remain a little bit agnostic on the art. I could see anywhere from I could see giving this an A, honestly, but I could also see giving it as low as a B+. Not really sure, why don't we split the difference, call it an A-, sounds about good to me. Hedron Archive is pretty cool. It's pretty cool in general. It's definitely cooler in the old border. Something about the structure of the person wearing the cape. I guess it's Jace, right? Yeah, it is Jace. Look at the flavor text. So I guess something about Jace's physique here, not that you can see much of it beneath the armor and the cape, it just bespeaks newness to me. Also, the framing here, maybe I could see an older card commissioned in this style being either a little bit closer up or a little bit zoomed out relative to what we see. I like the art a lot. I don't think it is as much of a slam dunk improvement from the new frame to the old frame as some other artifacts that we see, though. A-. Another BGX staple up next. Let's go. Very, very exciting. Abrupt Decay. And of course, we take the original printing and we put it back in the time-shifted frame, and that's a beautiful thing, and I will not counter-signal that at all. However, just for the sake of giving a full and accurate assessment, I actually am very much a fan of the alternate art here, the F&M promo. It's not an F&M promo, is it? But it's from Seb McKinnon. I like Svetlin Velenov's art as well, but to me, the McKinnon art is my favorite. It's my favorite depiction of Abrupt Decay, and it's the only other one. It's tempting to say that it wouldn't suit the old frame as well, but I actually disagree. My first instinct was that, but then I realized I kind of have a bit of a bias where I just kind of assume that the original art is the one that's more suited to time shifting, all else being equal. And that might be true on average, right? But in this case, the more I'm looking at this goblin just kind of melting into nothingness, the more I'm thinking, this, despite looking like a newer card, and despite McKinnon's art definitely feeling both new and old, and, consistently stylistic, but also very different from the broad pool of Magic art in general, I do think it could suit the old frame. It would be a bolder choice, though, maybe a riskier choice. You understand why they didn't go with it. I'm very excited about this, but at the same time, I think I have to give it a B+, because to me, the Abrupt Decay that we already have in the F&M promo is still very appealing, and I can't help but think that my dreams would truly be fulfilled with respect to this card if we had McKinnon's art in the time-shifted frame. Next up is Prized Amalgam, and these Innistrad-style cards do suit either frame pretty well in my view. I do have a bit of a nostalgic soft spot for old bordered zombies in general. I think the combination of everything here, the gold border suits the art very well. The colors, I think, broadly suit either frame about as well as one another, but when we do see, to me, the nostalgia of the gold border, especially as a card that will be visible a lot because it's either in the graveyard or on the battlefield unless you manage to exile it, right? So we're going to see a lot of it. I think that's cool to give it the old border treatment. And also, we've got the gravestone in the top, guys, the gravestone in the top. So while I think without this gravestone icon, maybe an A-, a good, solid improvement, the icon's huge, puts it over the top for me, gets it an A. Good job, Prized Amalgam, well done. Next is Knight of the Reliquary, and this is a beautiful card. It's a card that I think is very wisely time-shifted. It sees enough play in enough different formats that I think that's very, very cool, including in some older formats where old borders abound. And I think the art suits the gold border, for sure. I think the name, I've always really liked the name of this card. I think the name looks absolutely resplendent in the white font, the old-fashioned font, and the old-fashioned border. That said, there are two other considerations. The first consideration is that we lose the flavor text altogether. I don't remember if I've seen this happen, quite so often, but it definitely gets lost here. The flavor text is okay. It's not something that is a must-have, though, but we do lose that, maybe lose a little bit of the character of the card. And then there is also an alternate art version, which, for me, this is not it. I could see how some people like this, but for me, it's not even close. To me, this one does not exist. I would never play it over the original art from Michael Comark, which is very, very nicely done. So for me, those two other considerations, especially losing the flavor text, are the only thing that could keep this from an A+. I think I could give it an A, and I think I'd also be comfortable giving it an A+. Should we? Yeah, let's do it. I think this one is a home run. A+ for Knight of the Reliquary. Next is Consuming Aberration, a card about which I care very little, but I do think a lot about it. Feels very old-fashioned. I think anything from the name, maybe not quite so much the type line, but could be the type line as well, but certainly the text in the Star, this feels like a card that could have belonged to many older sets, right? And it's also another one where the art is good, but also doesn't really necessarily captivate my attention to the very highest degree, but is improved by the old frame, and is very good. Again, I can't criticize the art at all. It is quite nicely executed. There is also, just for the sake of completion, an alternate art promo, which is actually pretty cool too. It's kind of the same creature facing it's turned at a different angle, still kind of facing toward the viewer though, and we have also a similar setting, but just kind of a different take on it with some subtle and thematic differences as well. I like both. I like all printings of Consuming Aberration, but I think the time-shifting process is a bit of a success if we assume this card was a good idea to time-shift in the first place, which I don't play enough Commander really to know. So I'm going to give it an A- and feel pretty good about that. Next up is Wastes, and this is a strange one. I'm going to give it a B+, and the only reason it's not lower is because I think there needed to be an old bordered waste. If it's kind of the sixth basic land, you gotta give people an option to play the brown bordered basics in their deck. I get it, and I approve, and I completely agree, but I think we could have commissioned new art for this. Raymond Swanland's art is the one that they used, and it is fantastic, it is stunning, and it is a credit to the artist himself, and also to a newer style. I love the old style, but there is a time and a place for the new style. This is it. It is also a credit to the new frame, and the decision to do full art basic lands. Everything about Raymond Swanland's piece justifies all of those decisions and suits it down to a T. It looks out of place in the old border. Some people might think it looks cool. Some people might welcome the contrast, as I have with other things. To me, I don't really like it. I would actually consider playing these full art basics over that, and I literally always play brown bordered basics in my own decks. And then we have another very, very different wastes, which I dare say might, and I stress might, have suited the old border better, but I don't know that for sure. I think we'd want to be focusing in on the bottom half of this art to do that, and even then, I would need to see it rendered to really have a strong opinion. But yeah, love Raymond Swanland's art, definitely no counter signal to it at all, but I do not think it suits the project, but we do have some upsides to it as well. B+. Blighted Woodland is next, and it's one that's a little weird. I don't understand. The art does not inspire me. The art doesn't stand out to me. It's not memorable. It's not especially appealing. The card itself, I don't really even know why I would play this in most decks. I don't get it. There are thousands, literally, or maybe not thousands, there are hundreds of other lands I think would be better time-shifted candidates than this, and the old border doesn't even really improve things much as far as I can tell. It's not even art that is spectacularly, illuminated by a different framing, so I don't know what to give this one. I think I'm going to give it another D. We've given out a couple Ds so far today. I don't know, that's what it earns to me. Panharmonicon is fabulous. It is an A+. It's a centerpiece card, it's a build-around card, it's a powerful, relatively unique card, and it's one that is immensely improved by the old border. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I don't like Kaladesh block, doesn't really appeal to me, but you stick it in an old frame, especially the artifacts, and suddenly it is one of the coolest settings in Magic. So yeah, easy A+ for the wonderful-looking time-shifted Panharmonicon. Slimefoot the Stowaway, I have to confess, looks relatively cool in the old frame, but it is not as much of an improvement as other ones we've seen, and, you know, building around the Saprolings and Dominaria is cool as a callback, but at the same time it did feel just a little bit forced to me. I also don't know if we would ever have heard of a card called Slimefoot way back in the day when the old border was the norm, so all things considered, I was tempted to say this is enough of an upgrade to get an A. I'm thinking more like an A-. I would still absolutely play this card over other versions, but yeah, A- is about right. Grenzo Dungeon Warden is a card that I think is a good idea to time shift, and as far as the aesthetics, I don't exactly have a strong opinion. I think the figure himself suits the old frame quite well, and I think the naming conventions can suit either setting, either frame, either era, right? I think something about the background, even though the background itself looks like it could belong to older art, I think the background arguably fits better in the newer frame, just as far as the colors go more than anything else. So that probably stops this from getting a solid A, a hard A. I'm going to give Grenzo an A- as well, and yeah, it's pretty cool though. I like it a lot. Arch of Orazca looks brilliant. Looks brilliant in the old frame. I think I cannot quite give it an A+, because it does suit the new frame pretty well, and also an effect like Ascend. And the text, The City's Blessing, they just, it's hard to shake the association of newer sets for me, right? So ultimately, I think this is an okay one to print, but not also very top of the line for excitement either. So it works well. There's a lot to like. I'm going to give it an A. That might be slightly generous. You could see this being an A- like the last few as well. But sure, let's give this one an A. No A+, though. Doesn't quite hit those dizzy heights. Next up is Trigon Predator, and I, don't have any experience with or against this card. It's not an iconic card for me, for my experience, but I do have a complaint about this. Why did we time shift this printing? Nothing against Jack Wayne. It's a fine piece of art. It's actually pretty good. I like a good amount about it. But there's also Carl Critchlow's Dissension printing, and to me, it's a very, very different take. The first one looks basically like a dragon. The second one looks like some kind of horrifying creature that could have belonged to earlier eras of Magic so easily. So easily. And everything about this looks older. The background, the more muted colors, everything. This is the slam dunk printing in the old frame that they missed, and I don't know why they didn't do that. I really don't. So between that and the fact that the card itself probably didn't, frankly, need to be time shifted, I have to give this one like a C-, maybe even as low as a D+, simply because, number one, why did we do it? Number two, what a missed opportunity, if we're going to do it with this one. Next we have Solemn Simulacrum, and I'm going to be honest, I did not know at all that there were 5 different arts for Solemn Simulacrum, and the one that they did time shift is the original Mirrodin printing, and I do have to say, that's probably the correct one, although, this art will divide opinion more, probably, than lots of the others, which are, maybe have higher floors as far as people's expectations, and they're more safe, they're more expected. This one feels like it could easily belong to old sets in Magic, and therefore is probably the best fit. I think the very old-fashioned coloring as well does see a lot of improvement from the brown frame, providing a contrast. Let's take a look at the other Simulacrums. This M12 one is the one I see the most. To me, it's probably the the one I really associate with the card. But I think the original printing is probably a better time-shifted candidate. We also have the Masterpiece, which is clearly a riff off of the M12 one, which is very, very cool, but probably belongs, continuing to make the Masterpieces special belongs only in the Masterpiece. We also have a newer take on it. This one was printed a few times recently. It's a cool, different version. I actually think it looked pretty darn badass in the old brown frame, but again, doesn't feel quite as old. But I would like to see this one in the brown frame for sure. And then we have this full art M21 Power Rangers looking dude. If one or two things about the direction of the artwork changed, I could also see this fitting in the old frame, but as it is, much like the Masterpiece, it should probably stay with its own unique special printing. So overall, that's a lot to say about a card that I don't have a strong opinion on. I think it's well suited enough to the task of time shifting, but at the same time, with 5 printings already in circulation, did we really need to time shift this one? I'm not sure, but I like it well enough. B+. Ramanop Ruins is next, and this one gets an A+. You get bonus points for being a brown-bordered desert. That in and of itself is really, really cool. Desert itself goes very far back. In bringing back deserts as a type is cool, but didn't feel as authentic in the new border, but now it does in the old border, and major chain lightning vibes off of this very old card depicting a lightning bolt, basically. So I have nothing more to say about this one than I already have. A+, this one is a home run. It's a grand slam. Rakdos Charm, a really cool card, one that I could be excited because it could go into decks that I play, but I just don't find the art very inspiring, and I also find the art and the direct reference to Rakdos in the title to be very, very postmodern as far as the framing decision is concerned, so I don't agree that this should be a time-shifted card. If it was going to be time-shifted, I wish we got some new art, and ultimately I'm just not that thrilled about it, despite it being one of the more playable cards for my decks in this set, so I'm going to give it a C-, and that's maybe even being a little bit generous. Cloud Shredder Sliver is next, one of the slivers that was created by and for Modern Horizons and therefore only has that as its only printing, and I think slivers in general are greatly improved by the old border, roughly to the extent that stuff like goblins and elves are, like it just does suit these older fashioned tribes, so I'm a fan. I'm going to give this one an A, no reason not to. Vanquisher's Banner out of Ixalan is a pretty sweet one, guys, and I think while it does look nice in the new frame, it looks nicer in the old frame. I don't know if it's A+ nicer, but this, again, is a centerpiece card. It's one that's going to, it's like it's a flag, it's depicting a flag. It's rallying and inspiring your on-field warriors, and therefore it does merit, I think, the time-shifting process. It's definitely cool enough, sees enough play in Commander and in casual formats, I'm sure, that I think people will love having the old bordered version around, and I'm going to give it an A. I don't think it's quite spectacular enough for an A+, but an A, I think it has earned. Leveler, however, does get an A+. We have seen Carl Critchlow's art crop up a couple times here, including in the case I just made for his Dissension printing of the Simic Flyer over the other newer printing. Carl Critchlow is an artist whose work really, really suits the old border in a very strong way. I think Leveler is no exception to that. Leveler also has a unique enough effect that even though it's not the most powerful thing under the sun, it's definitely unique. It's kind of zany in an old-fashioned style of way. I think this one's a very strong A, maybe even an A+. I think I said A+. Should I stick with that? Sure. Why not? Leveler OP. Dovan's Veto is next, and as far as the effect goes and even the name, I think it's a pretty good time-shifting candidate, even though Dovan, as far as I know, is a more recent addition to the lore. As far as the art goes, I don't know how to feel about it. I love the contrast of the fire and the flames with the blue and white casting cost. That is already a nice contrast, and then you have the old border kind of giving a third point of reference, I think altogether the whole piece is pretty cool. The problem is, and maybe it's just the rendition here, it still does feel a little bit new to me, but you know, if I'm looking closely at the art on the right, seeing the detailing on the face starts to feel a little more real to me, a little bit more like a painting in the old school type of way, even though the flames and that effect feels very new. So ultimately, there's a lot going on here. I think I settle it around a B+. I could see raising that to an A-, though. Somewhere in that range is where this card feels right for me. My friends, Howard Lyon must feel proud because Bojuka Bog has been printed 14 times and only ever using his original art. You'll love to see that. It's from World Wake, and while it's not like my very favorite art of all time, it's very, very good art, and it does depict a bog, it does depict dead things, and that has something to do with the effect of the card. So I've always liked Bojuka Bog well enough. It's a cool card as well in general to have floating around a format. However, this is made way better, and also made to feel more powerful, as with Field of Ruin, by the old border treatment, definitely boosting these utility lands in a pretty significant way, and unlike with Field, there is no question in my mind that the art suits the old frame, so I think this one is pretty hype. I'm going to give it an A, and I could, on maybe another day, see giving it all the way up to an A+, but yeah, a strong A for Bojuka Bog. Tide Hollow Sculler also gets an A, and it's arguably even closer to an A+ than Bojuka Bog, but to me it falls just a tad shy, and part of it is because it suits the new frame very, very well. Now, I also think it suits the old frame very well, and also the kind of slow, stately procession along this river depicted by the Sculler in the RK post art. That suits the old frame very nicely, but it is not to be underestimated how well this card does slot into the new frame. You've got the gold type line and title background. You've got, again, that silvery, grayish white border. All of that frames this art very, very well. And it's also framed well in the old frame, but in different ways. So I love both. I'm obviously going to lean toward the old art. That's why it gets an A. But it has such a high baseline that it's difficult to give it an A+, because it's not like it was a bad-looking card before, not even close. The other reason maybe to keep it at an A is there is an alternative art. There is the DCI promo, again from Carl Critchlow, who keeps popping up. To me, I do prefer the original in this case, but it is a respectable take, I think, on Sculler. There's a little more action involved here as far as, it doesn't feel as still, right? And if you're looking for something with a little bit more motion involved, fair enough, but I like the original. Love the time-shifting decision here. We'll give it an A. Hollow One is next. Easy A+. Hour of Devastation, another set that didn't necessarily thrill me, although I liked a lot about it. It just it all didn't quite come together for me. And now I realize what was missing. It just belongs in the old border, and suddenly Hollow One is so cool. And compounding this effect for me is the fact that I do miss playing against Hollow One. The only thing that sucked about it is randomly losing to bad luck with Burning Inquiry, although sometimes you would win to good luck from Inquiry as well. Beyond that, it was a fascinating deck to face, and I really miss that. So Hollow One, for nostalgia reasons and for the reasons that I mentioned about it just looking so good in the old border, both the card itself and these types of sets in general, A+. A+ for the Hollow Boy. I don't really have a strong opinion here on Epic Experiment. This is just the type of card that has never really thrilled me under most circumstances, so hard for me to say that it's a huge improvement even in the old border. Hard for me to get excited about it in general. I think this one settles around a B, maybe a B- for me, and I would be willing to cede grading to this to people who are more into the style of art, into the style of card. Nothing about it is really why I play Magic, right? So I remain agnostic. Yeah, the more I talk about it, the more I'm going to say, let's give it a slightly lower grade, B-, potentially falling to a C+. It's a little bit whatever on the whole. At the same time, I have no overwhelming complaints. Mystic Sanctuary. This is another pseudo-troll in the vein of Simian Spirit Guide. I know they designed these sets years in advance, and it's not timed with the bans, but it does feel that way. Anyway, unlike Simian Guide, I'm not salty about this one, and also unlike Simian Guide, this is just much improved. Mystic Sanctuary was always a beautiful card, even though I didn't want to admit it. The art was subtle, understated, peaceful, very, very nice, quite the opposite of the feeling engendered by playing against it. But we don't have to worry about playing against it in Modern any longer, so we can be a little bit more objective about the art, and I think the art, again, is very nice and just suits the old border beautifully. The old border does make it pop a little bit more, also kind of nestles it, almost, gives it a home, so to speak. I'm a big fan of this one. I cannot bring myself to give Mystic Sanctuary, the bane of my nightmares, an A+, and I might not anyway, to be fair, even if it was a card that I didn't hate playing against, but I think an A. I think if this earns an A, it merits an A. No qualms with doing that. Mortify, my friends, is a fascinating card, and they picked the original art from Glenn Angus, which definitely feels very, very old. I'm getting similar vibes to other older gold cards. Delirium comes to mind, not the ability, the card itself. This could almost belong to a variety of sets, but at the same time, doesn't quite feel like it fits directly in any old one. Nevertheless, suiting the old border pretty well, but there are a lot of Mortifies out there. Let's take a quick look at them. We have this full art from Brian Snoddy, textless, also very old feeling, but not one that I think belongs in the old border like the original printing does. And then we have two really nice Mortifies. I would definitely like to see this one from Nils Ham in the gold old border for sure. And then we have this more gothy vibe, a very consciously Orzhov card from Anthony Palumbo. Honestly, there's a lot of choices here for Mortify. So I think in a vacuum, this is a fine selection. In practice, I don't know that it's, as much of a flagship card in Magic the Gathering as some of the others to be time-shifted. There is also 4 really good choices to begin with, so the necessity falls even a little bit shorter there for me. On top of that, seeing Glenn Angus's really more starkly old-fashioned style compared to even most of the other time-shifted cards makes me wonder what else might have been, what other really old-fashioned styles of art we have missed out on. So, all things considered, I'm left with a slightly bitter taste in my mouth looking at these, but ultimately also think it's a pretty cool project in a vacuum. Find it hard to complain about this one, so maybe B+ is about fair, right? Sounds good to me. Secret Plans from Darken is a card that looks good in the new frame and looks glorious in the old frame. Absolutely glorious. I dare say that the only thing wrong with it is alongside the new frame, it just feels like it's a little bit too much. And in the old frame serves to kind of settle the whole piece down, to kind of cool it off a little bit, while at the same time making it feel older and more arcane. I might be overstepping a little bit here, might be getting a little overzealous, but I think I want to give it an A+. I'm that impressed by how this art looks in the old frame. Manifold Key is, to me, a little bit of a strange one to time shift, but at the same time, I think something kind of like this was bound to be time shifted, but to me there are a lot of other artifacts that have multiple different activated abilities that were perhaps better candidates for this. As for the art itself, it is to me significantly improved by the old frame, and in some ways feels like an older fashioned art design and direction and execution, but in other ways also feels new. I think there's elements of both at work here, so I don't dislike it. I don't dislike anything about it. At the same time, it's not as thrilling or as well suited as other alternatives might have been, so I think about a B+ here is about right. Final card, my friends, and I finally made it through all 121. Thanks to all of you watching this. This is a completely ridiculous meme project in retrospect, but I had fun doing it, what can I say? I have earned my title as the #1 old border respecter. You can't deny that, right? All the hours I've put into looking at old borders, right? But anyway, Sorcerer Spyglass, our final one. We've got to decide on this one. I'll be honest, I never really loved the pirate thing, never really kicked it out of the park for me. It's okay, I've seen better themes, though, for me. Didn't really thrill me, and I never really liked the way Sorcerer Spyglass looked. It's okay, but it's the type of art that doesn't really, strike any particular chords with me. That said, does it look better in the old frame? Yeah, absolutely. Does the card itself merit time shifting? Yeah, probably. Perhaps not quite as much as Pithing Needle, but arguably more than Pithing Needle just because the Pithing Needle printings are already much more representative of their power level to me, and maybe much more suited to the task as well. And, Sorcerer Spyglass, right? It's not just a pirate's tool, there's something more arcane about this, so overall, it's improved by the old frame. Not that thrilled by the art in general, though. I actually like Aaron Miller's alternative art a lot better. It does feel more arcane, feels more representative of the name, and I also think it would suit the old frame better. So I think the brown frame is better than either existing printing, therefore I have to give it at least a B, or maybe something in the B's, but maybe a B- is about right, because I think we did miss a trick. I think if they had taken the Aaron Miller art and put it in the old brown border, I would give this one an A. As it is, let's give it a B-, and it just shows the power of the selection as far as the art is concerned, and as always, you may disagree. That is, of course, fine, my friends, so thank you once again for watching. Thanks for hanging out for the memes and the analysis and everything in between. We're going to do more gameplay next, as I said at the beginning of the video. This has been immensely long. I didn't realize there were quite so many cards left, but there you go. I hope this was entertaining for you, and I will see you for the next video.